So, over the last few years, I've become convinced that there is something or someone in the spiritual world who can be usefully referred to as the devil. And what I mean by that is I think there is a conscious force in the spiritual realm that underlies physical life, a conscious force that is advocating for evil in the world and evil's handmaiden slavery, as opposed to God, who is the source of human freedom and the good. Now, I don't think that Satan is some red guy with horns and a tail and cloven hooves any more than I think that God is an old man with a long white beard. These are images we use to focus our minds. And yes, because of the sight-based prejudice of our evolved bodies, we sometimes let these images override the unseeable spiritual truth, which is harder to imagine. All the same, I find that if I assume there is a devil, life becomes more predictable and my view of life becomes more realistic. And that's a kind of evidence. When a mathematical equation correctly predicts physical events like the path that light will take over a long distance, that's evidence that the equation is true. And in the same way, when a sane person's spiritual observations allow him to accurately predict and explain human behavior, that's evidence that his spiritual conjectures bear some relation to the actual spiritual truth. And we know I'm a sane man because I've been insane and I can tell the difference. So one of the things I've observed about the devil is that he's very good at turning the victims of evil into the servants of evil. It's one of his favorite tricks. The victims of child abuse become child abusers. The victims of racial hatred become hateful racists. The victims of violence become violent in turn, and so on. Because he's a spiritual creature, Satan doesn't care who does the hating as long as the hating gets done. Now, we've been talking all week about ideas versus this idea of identity and silence versus truth-speaking. Leftism, which is a distorted slave philosophy of racism and sexism and hatred, loves to jump on true ideas and brand them according to leftist categories, to call them racist and sexist or hateful in order to bully truth-tellers into silence. So, for instance, I oppose modern feminism because feminism opposes femininity, which I think is a great human good that helps complement and balance masculinity and helps preserve some of our most important values through the generations. And so I get accused of looking down on women and not believing they should have equal rights and free choices, which is absolutely untrue. I think women, generally speaking, are different from men and will choose and live different lives, and I celebrate that. But I also believe they have the same individual rights and a range of individual variations and freedom of choice, the same freedom of choice that men have. I oppose racism because I know that every person is created in the image of his creator and that we honor our creator by honoring his image in mankind. So when I say there's high crime in black neighborhoods, which is true, or that Haiti is a hellhole, which is true, I'm not saying that's because of the color of the people there. It's because of ideas and culture and corruption, a lot of which, by the way, have been sold to the poor and powerless in those places by the rich and powerful of all different colors. Now, many of these ideas of spirituality, truth, and love have been developed and preserved through the years by white men. And I'm grateful to white men for doing that. And I won't waste time honoring bad ideas simply because they come from some minority or women. But I don't think it's the whiteness of the men that gave them their ideas. I think history moves in all kinds of mysterious ways. And in the end, it's only the ideas that matter. Let me show you what I mean using a little book I like to call the Bible, because that's its name. After the fall of man, God chose to re-enter the world through the Jews. And God loved the Jews for carrying that burden, which obviously wasn't easy. But just before Jesus showed up on the scene, John the Baptist, a Jew, came to his fellow Jews and said to them, listen, don't be so proud of being Jews because God can make Jews out of the stones on the ground. In other words, he was saying it's not your race that makes you great, it's the truth you've been allowed to carry. Oh, and by the way, here comes Jesus to spread that truth to all the races of the world. We Americans, or Westerners, if you like, likewise have been granted the privilege of carrying a great truth to the world, the essentially Christian truth that individuals have dignity and equality of rights. But God can make Westerners out of the stones on the ground. And happily, over the last 200 or so years, those truths have been spreading to all kinds of people around the world. Now, as always, it's an open question whether those ideas will keep spreading. Right now, it's Islamic extremism and hateful leftism that oppose them. So I'm going to stand on the side of those truths, whether my opponent happens to be a black man or a nasty woman or a white guy who thinks it's his skin color that makes him ever so special. To my mind, those who speak for hatred and slavery, whether they're white supremacists or Black Lives Matter bigots, those who speak against our rights, whether it's a homosexual thug persecuting a Christian baker or an Islamic thug persecuting a gay man, and all those who try to silence debate, whether they're leftists or other leftists, all these have got the wrong ideas. The right ideas, individual freedom, equality of rights, and love of each other, and love of a loving God who is our creator and the source of every good thing, right ideas must be defended fearlessly so that we can chase the devil back to his safe space, which is hell. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show.